A college student werewolf finds her destined mate is already claimed by another. How will she confront this forbidden love? When her wolf instinct tells her to fight for her mate, and her mind says to let go, which side will she choose? Unlock the secret life of a werewolf college student. Subscribe now for exclusive insights. Chapter 4. It was like my mind was in a whirlwind. I was finally here in front of my mate, and he knew who I was. My heart fluttered at the word mate. It felt nice to hear him admit it. Did this mean he accepted it? His hand gently touched my face while his eyes searched mine. A warm sensation filled my body and tingles were left behind by his touch. Before I knew what I was doing, I was leaning into it. I craved more. The world had now stopped and we were the only ones in it. Nothing mattered besides me and him. I wanted him. No, I needed him, and I could only hope he felt the same about me. His silence was deafening, offering no insight to his true feeling for me. He was revealing nothing. His smile was enough to assure me, but when it became suddenly serious I felt doubtful again. You ran from me. He mumbled, sounding a bit hurt, and dropping his hand by his side. Why? That brought me out of my trance and all my senses came back to me. I took that moment to step away from him. I can't let him feel anything for me until he knows everything. He deserves to know what I have done. At first he had a look of confusion on his face from my actions, but it was only seconds before it turned into anger. You're rejecting me? He asked. I flinched at his harsh tone. No. I insisted. Not exactly. Then what? He demanded. He wasn't using his alpha tone on me, which I was thankful for, but it didn't make me feel any better either. It didn't ease the guilt I was feeling over my actions. I let my eyes wander back to the ground again, as I thought over my ways to explain to him. It would not be easy. So it's true then. She is your mate. His dad said emotionlessly. She is. Daniel confirmed. Then why did you run? Robert now asked me. The disappointment still etched across his features, unrelenting. I have a better question. My mate said. Why didn't you look as surprised to find out I was your mate as I did? In fact, you didn't seem surprised at all. I started, but failed to find the words to continue. I honestly didn't know what to say to him. Should I tell him I've known for nearly a week now? You already knew, didn't you? He asked, and don't lie. I'll know if you are. I nodded my head regretfully before looking back up to meet his eyes. For a few days. I admitted. I've known since the pack meeting. I heard a gasp come from my mom and dad at my confession, but didn't dare look at them. I knew they were not happy with my secret. And you still went out to that horrid club with that no-good Jennifer. Mom scolded. At that, Daniel went livid. I don't think I'd ever seen him so mad in my life. It scared me. I started to slowly back away from him in case his wolf lost it, because right now I wasn't so sure he had himself under control. You went to a club with other men. He yelled. His fist quickly collided with the hood of the vehicle in front of him, causing a massive dint to form on it. My heart rate skyrocketed at his anger. I was scared. I didn't do anything. I said, but it only came out a mere whisper. I only went to what? Drink and possibly be taken advantage of by some stranger. Are you that reckless? His tone was harsh towards us, and it made my wolf feel ashamed. She just wanted his affection, but instead all he offered us was anger. He was too upset to show us anything else. She shows no discipline, Daniel. She is too rebellious to be Luna, Robert interjected. She should be punished. My wolf was growing angry at his father for butting in where he didn't belong. This was between Daniel and me. It had nothing to do with him. She growled at him inwardly. It was low and threatening. "I'll handle this, father," he snapped before taking a step closer to me. "Look, I'm sorry I ran, but it just seemed like the right thing to do at the time. I never meant for you to find out," I said. "So you were just going to hide this from me forever?" he said, disbelieving. "You are with Jasmine. Who was I to come between you? You are my mate, that's who," he shouted. Anger was making its way back into his voice. I didn't like seeing him this way. When he saw my reaction toward him, he visibly calmed. "You should have told me," he said, a little more controlled now. "I know that now," I confessed. "I was in the wrong and I should have handled it differently, but nothing can be done about it now. What happened has happened. You hurt him." My wolf whined. "You hurt our mate." "I know, but what can I do about it now?" I stated. "Comfort him. Make him feel better," she suggested. As much as I wanted to, I didn't know if that was a good idea or not. We still hadn't settled things, and he has not made it clear what he plans to do about us yet. He may not want us. And even if he does, all of that might change after I tell him about the man in the diner. I don't know what he will do when he finds out what I have done. After a long silence, he finally decided to speak up again. "Look," he sighed. "It's already late, and I don't feel like dealing with what I came here for now. I think we should all rest and deal with this in the morning with a clear mind." I couldn't have agreed more with his statement. I think it would be for the best tonight. So much had already happened and there was no sense in adding any more to it. Besides, maybe if I give him a day to calm down over what has already happened, he will be more forgiving than delivering all the news to him at once. "I think that's a good idea," Mom said. "You two can talk about this in the morning when everyone has had time to calm down and think. Can I trust you until then, or should I take you home and lock you away?" he asked me. He was dead serious, and it caused me to swallow nervously while my heart beat at an irregular rate. I knew better than to test him right now. One wrong thing could cause him to go crazy wolf on me again, and that I didn't care to see that. One time was enough for now. "Yes," I answered. "I promise not to run again." "I don't trust her." Robert spoke again. I had to hold myself back from snapping at him. If it wasn't for he was my mate's father, I would have. I don't think he would like that very much, no matter the circumstance. However, my wolf was dying to bite his head off. Daniel was quiet for a moment, seemingly to be in thought from his father's words. With a contemplated sigh, he finally spoke. "Maybe it would be a good idea if you came with us." "What? No?" I shook my head. "I'm fine here. I promised you I wouldn't run." My wolf was angry at me for that. She wanted him to take us with them because that would mean we were together. She wanted Daniel's wolf, and I didn't know if I could stop her. That was part of the reason I refused to go. I don't want to do anything I'll regret later. When our wolves take over, we are merely backseat passengers to our lives. We can only watch what is happening, not control it, and that was a problem for me. I didn't like to relinquish control to anyone. "I know, but my wolf doesn't want to let you go after we just found you. The only thing that will put him at ease is to be near you," he explained. "And what about Jasmine?" I questioned. "You've hardly mentioned her in all of this. What does this mean for her?" I waited impatiently for his answer, as did my wolf. She was just as curious about it as I was. We both needed his answer before this could go any further. He had to choose what was most important to him. "I don't know," he replied wearily. "I can't think about it right now." That was not the answer I wanted to hear. If he couldn't choose me over her, then I obviously didn't mean as much to him as he has let on. "Then I won't go with you." I refuse to be second place to my own mate. You need to choose, and until then I'm staying here, I declared. Daniel immediately looked regretful of his words and tried to reach out and grab my hand. Seeing his attempt to touch me, I quickly pulled away from him, sending him a glare. I wouldn't allow him to influence me with our bond. There is no way that would be a fair fight. I wouldn't be able to resist him that way. I needed my mind to be clear and unaffected by him. It was the only way to keep my distance until he made his choice. I don't know if I can let you. I want you with me, he admitted. If you force me to go, I'll never forgive you. You'll have to take me kicking and screaming, I warned. He looked torn by his options, but didn't object. It made me respect him just a little bit more that he was taking my decision into consideration. He could have made me go regardless of the consequence, so that gave me hope that maybe he cared enough about me to give me a choice. I still couldn't hide my hurt though. He still had not picked me, and my wolf was not happy. We can send someone to patrol the house if you'd like. That was the first time James had spoken since everything came out about the two of us. He probably suspected something was up though by my pleading in the woods. I'm sure it all made sense to him now. If it will help keep your wolf at ease, I would have to agree, his dad piped in. Whoever we send won't let her leave, if that's what you want, James added. My anger rose and I sent the beater a glare. They were standing here talking about me, as if I weren't even here. They are treating me like some adolescent child in need of punishment. I am an adult. They can't keep me captive in my own house. With the nod of his head, Daniel agreed. It is. This time I couldn't stop the growl that erupted in me. I was angry and I was letting everyone around me know it. No. I have school and a job. You can't keep me here. I could see that trust was going to be an issue between us from now on. He still didn't trust me on my own even after I had promised him. That wasn't going to be easy to forgiving. When I promise something I always stick to it, but he wouldn't give me a chance to prove that to him. Then you will be followed to and from, he stated. I don't need babysitters. I am perfectly capable of getting there on my own. He had only found out I was his mate less than an hour ago, and he was already smothering me. One of the downsides of belonging to an alpha, I suppose. Plus the fact that I ran from him didn't help my case in the trust department. That was my own fault, I guess. Like he hadn't even heard me, he nodded his head at the beater, then looked back to me. James will stay here until I send out someone else. You can go to school and work, but that is all. That's not fair, I shouted. He took another step forward until our chests were almost touching. I could feel his breath fanning my face, driving my wolf crazy. She was clawing at me to get out. His face became grave when he looked at me, making me feel a little more intimidated than I'm used to. I am your alpha. I am not required to be fair. I do what I believe is best, and having someone watching over you is best. I won't hear any more about it, is that clear? He used his alpha tone on me. It hurt. Not physically, but emotionally it did. He was ordering his own mate around like I was just another pack member. Why would he treat me any different? That was a silly thing to expect from him. He took his duty very seriously. His job came first before anything else. Is that clear? He repeated. His eyes were hard. I swallowed, trying to push back my unshed tears, and nodded. Good. His face softened slightly. He tucked a strand of loose hair behind my ear and backed away from me. I'll be back tomorrow morning before you leave for school. Be expecting me. He opened the door to the vehicle without taking his eyes from me and started to slide in. Before he could close the door after him, I couldn't stop myself from calling after him. He paused at the sound of his name. Thanks for trusting me, I replied, Sarcasm was heavy in my voice. He frowned at my statement. Trust is earned, not given. But how can I earn it when I've not even been given the chance to? I shot. With a heavy sigh he replied, "We'll discuss it tomorrow." He quickly got inside the Escalade followed by his father, leaving James behind, just as he had promised. My parents' disapproving eyes were on me the entire time. When they pulled away, James jumped into his wolf form, shredding what clothes he was wearing, and ran into the woods behind us. I could feel his eyes on us from the distance. He was taking his job seriously. Not that I thought he wouldn't. He was very loyal to Daniel, and they were best friends, so it was to be expected, I guess. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom asked, not hiding her disappointment. "Mom, can we please not do this right now?" I sighed, walking into the house ahead of them. Dad cleared his throat. "I think you owe us an explanation, don't you?" Once we were inside the living room, I spun to face them. "I don't know what I can tell you that you don't already know." At the pack meeting, when he announced his wedding and mating to Jasmine, I recognized him as my mate. Before he could find out about me, I left and decided not to tell him to keep from ruining his relationship and possible rejection. That's it. That's all there is to it. I was feeling irritated again, after having to explain the situation to them all over again. I really didn't know why they needed to ask anyway. I thought it was quite obvious after mine and Daniel's little confrontation tonight. "That's not what I meant," he clarified. "Why did you keep it from us? You know that you could tell us anything." His eyes held deep disappointment in them. If he was trying to make me feel guilty, then he was successful in it. I should have known this would come back to bite me in the butt sooner or later. "I know," I mumbled, looking down in shame. "I guess I just wanted to forget." The less people that knew about this, the better. It was the truth. That's why I hadn't even told my very best friend, Jennifer. She would bug me about just like everyone else, and I'd never hear the end of it. At some point the word would have gotten around Daniel too, and that's what I was trying to prevent, but to no avail. It seemed to be unavoidable. When no one said anything, I took the opportunity to end the conversation for time being. I really did just want to put my mind to rest. After today I had a lot to think about. I am going to bed. Our problems will still be here in the morning. Good night. They didn't stop me when I left the room and proceeded up the stairs. For once, I think they understood my need to be alone. I yawned as I reached my bed, but I was far from sleepy. I had too much to think about for that. I needed to figure out what I was going to do about my situation, and most importantly, Daniel. There was still so much to work out. Chapter 5 The past few days were a complete pain. Daniel had been true to his word, and our beater, James, or another one of our wolves, had been watching over me since that night. I hadn't been going out other than to work or school, and I have been slowly going crazy. I felt like it had been much longer than a week. At this rate, I was sure to lose it if he didn't let me breathe. He still hadn't given me his answer about Jasmine yet, which only proved to make me angrier at him. Every day that he put it off, the more resentful I became. Even though he had come over to visit me often, it still didn't make up for his behavior. I only spoke to him when I had to. Most of the time, he would just sit and stare at me, not even bothering to make conversation. It was awkward, but it gave me time to think. I often wondered if she knew about me. Had he told her anything? Surely she would have suspected something different in him by now. He left her every morning and evening to come see me. Wouldn't that become suspicious? No doubt it passed it off as pack duty. I felt hurt and angry, among other things. This was not good for me or my wolf. We were about at our limit when it came to the alpha. If he didn't accept or reject me soon, then we were going to do it for him. This was getting ridiculous. "Excuse me, miss. More coffee, please." My eyes wandered to the impatient man at table 3 that was being entirely rude. As if banging the empty mug on the table would make it come any quicker. If anything, it made me intentionally move slower. I had no respect for people like him. I still tried to remain polite to everyone though, just to keep from having a complaint filed on me. It was the right thing to do. I hadn't had one yet and I planned to keep it that way. I really needed that raise next month. Grabbing the coffee pot, I slowly moved towards the dark brown table that sat on the opposite side of the diner, and smiled politely once I reached it. "Here you go, sir." He held up a hand to stop me before the hot liquid could even escape its container. "Is that decaf?" "I can only drink decaf." "If it's not, you can take it back and bring me what I ordered," he grumbled. I had to bite my tongue to keep the not-so-kind words from escaping my mouth. "It is?" I replied as nicely as I could. "Fine." After he removed his hand, I poured the coffee, and walked away, not sparing him another word, as he did the same for me. Not even a simple thank you on his part, but it's not like I expected one. Oh well, I'm sure that attitude has gotten him several loogie beverages in the past and will continue in the future. I'd be lying if I said that didn't make me a little happy. I smiled to myself. "Care to share what has you so amused?" I jumped at the sound of the person's voice from the bar stool behind me. Thankfully, I had already placed the pot back in its rightful place before doing so. As I turned to face the man, I was a bit shocked at who sat before me. No. It couldn't be. What was he doing here? Was he on a suicide mission? Wolves from my pack were spaced all around the place, with their eyes on him in curiosity. Though Kieran was technically on no man's land, that being town, James still wasn't pleased with another wolf being so close to me. Daniel's orders, I suppose. He looked tense while he gazed at us. "What are you doing here?" I whispered. I tried to remain calm so no one from my pack would notice my panic. He deserved the benefit of a doubt, didn't he? I wanted to believe he had a real reason for being here before I turned him over. I took a quick sniff of the air around him and frowned. I most certainly knew that he was no human, so why did he smell like one? His scent had almost completely changed since last time. He smirked and looked towards James's scrutinizing eyes before answering. "Looks like someone has you under their watch," he stated. "What did you do?" He looked back at me with clear amusement. I almost huffed until I stopped myself. "I didn't do anything." "What did you do?" I wanted to say more, like asking him why he was here, but I knew that if I did that then the other wolves would hear me and would know something was up. I couldn't afford that right now. I was already in enough trouble as is. "What do you mean?" He was playing dumb to my questions. "What I mean is, did you find the friend you were looking for?" I was trying to convey a message with my eyes, and either he didn't notice, or he didn't care. I wanted him to get out of here before he got in trouble. I honestly didn't feel like he was a bad person, just a little mischievous. He could possibly pose any real threat to anyone, could he? He hadn't harmed me. "Do you two know each other?" James's voice caught me by surprise. He was standing right next to me at the end of the counter. He stared at Kieran while he awaited a reply. "We are just talking, pup, relax," Kieran said. That was enough to make James express his anger with a low throaty growl, one that only we wolves could hear. The human seemed oblivious as to what was happening, or rather about to happen. James looked back at me gravely. "Daniel isn't going to like this." "You don't have to tell him," I suggested to him before glancing at Kieran. "Our visitor was just leaving, weren't you?" "No, actually," he grinned. "I haven't even ordered yet." "It's too late, I've already contacted him anyway," the beater stated. "He's on his way." I felt my stomach drop. Why would you do that? Because there is another wolf here, and he wants to talk to him. He may have some answers about the trespasser. He replied, still eyeing Kieran. Kieran smiled, like all of this amusing to him, and picked up the menu in front of him. His eyes scanned it slowly, taking his sweet time with ordering, ignoring the suspicious beater seated next to him. Having a problem with security? He teased. Can't Night Shadow protect its own land? James growled a little louder this time. We believe someone within the pack helped him on, and we are determined to find out who it was. Wait, then that means it wasn't me. I felt overjoyed as relief came over me. I never helped him on the land. I only told him where it was. He couldn't have entered without help. My relief was short-lived when realization swept over me. Then if it wasn't me, who was it? Someone in our pack is a traitor. That thought was very unsettling. Kieran said nothing and only smirked. He made sure to lower his menu to show it off too. James didn't notice. He was too busy concentrating on the salt shaker that sat in front of him on the counter. He must have undoubtedly been receiving or sending a message from a certain alpha. He's here, James announced suddenly, standing from his seat. His eyes flashed the door on his left, awaiting his arrival. My heart began to thump loudly in my chest at the thought of seeing Daniel again. I hadn't seen him since we had words a couple nights ago, and my wolf was missing him. I, however, was still angry at him. All his glory, he finally stepped through the door looking as brooding and sexy as ever. He was all business, and though that annoyed me sometimes, I had to admit that, right now, it was hot. He nodded to James as soon as he saw him, as if replying to something. His eyes fell directly on Kieran. They were cold and calculating. His approach seemed more of a threat than a common act. Kieran didn't even flinch in his presence. He was gutsy for an ordinary wolf. When he removed the menu completely and their eyes met, Daniel tensed. It was as if knew Kieran in some way. He seemed displeased to see him either way. What are you doing here, Kieran? His question demanded a reply. I thought this mutual territory. I can be here if I want, he replied simply. Daniel frowned. That's not what I meant. Why you here of all places? Kieran shrugged as if what he were about to say was nothing. I came to visit my dear mate, of course. I gasped. How could he possibly have a mate, when he was here hitting on me only a few days ago? He wouldn't do that if he had a mate. She's not your mate anymore. My mate objected. Yes, because you took her from me. Kieran was showing something besides amusement now. It was anger, pure anger, and resentment directed at my mate. She rejected you and severed the bond. I had nothing to do with that. She didn't tell me until it was done. But it was because of your relationship with her, was it not? He accused. It was only then I understood who I finally understood who they were talking about. It was Jasmine. She was the one this whole thing was about. Kieran was her mate. It was rare that a wolf was ever rejected. It had to be under dire circumstances, like already being mated to someone else, for example. When a wolf mates with someone that isn't their true mate, it forges a bond between them and severs the intended bond completely. When and if you ever run across your true mate after that, there will be nothing there besides a small recognition between the two wolves. The other mate is then free to move on to with someone as well. What's broken can never be joined again. Whatever you decide will become permanent. It is a choice that should not be taken lightly. Then give her back to me. You can end it at any time. His voice held something in it that I couldn't quite place what it was, but it seemed that Daniel had no problem recognizing it. You know I can't do that now, he replied solemnly. Everything has changed. My heart sank at his words. So, he wasn't letting her go after all. He didn't choose me. She had persuaded his to stand by her, no doubt. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. His eyes broke from Kieran and to me almost instantly. They held pity and regret. He looked like he wanted to say so much, but he didn't. He just stood there silently. He rejects us, my wolf whispered. He chose another mate. She whimpered the new realization, and I wished for anything that I could in some way console her, but I was just as broken as her. I felt weak and sick. I had to grab onto the counter just to keep my balance. Daniel became concerned, but didn't move to help me. Tell me why that is, Alpha. Kieran spat the word like he didn't even deserve it, and looked at him in disgust. This was a side of Kieran I was not used to seeing. He was always so calm and easygoing. It was completely opposite of what it was now. You already know, given you were the wolf on our land the other night, weren't you? Irrelevant, he shrugged. I'm sure your mate would love to hear the answer as well, he added. Daniel looked defeated. He glanced around the room at the many faces in the diner. No of them being human. Someone must have ushered them out at the confrontation. We couldn't risk being found out if a fight erupted. It was too important to keep our secret. Everyone awaited Daniel's reply, including me. I wanted to know, even though I didn't know how much more I could take. It felt as if my soul would break at any minute. She's pregnant. He answered. Jasmine is having our pups. No. The pain inside me was more excruciating than I could convey. It felt as if something inside me had been ripped out. Like my soul. I felt empty now. My body was nothing but a wasteland. Nothing of importance lied within me anymore. Without Daniel I was nothing but empty and broken. I fell to the ground on my hands and knees and cried out in pain. Someone's arms quickly wrapped around my shoulder and held me to them while I sobbed, letting my tears hit the floor. Then, I guess there's nothing left to do, but make it official, is there? The voice was right next to me. It was him. Kieran was the one to comfort me. Not Daniel, not a member of my pack, but Kieran. He held me to him closely. Do it, he ordered. The faster you do this, the quicker she will heal. Put an end to her suffering. He ordered. He was sounding more like an alpha with every word. I didn't look up, but I took it by my mate's silence he was taking Kieran's words into consideration. He was thinking. I'm so sorry, Claire. It was Daniel who spoke. And then he continued. I, Daniel Montgomery, Alpha of the Night Shadow Pack, hereby reject you, Claire Warren, as my mate and Luna of this pack. Your lies are no longer to this pack, therefore you may leave upon your choosing. The decision is yours. All the air left my lungs while I tried to gasp for air, but it didn't work. I could no longer breathe. My head became dizzy. He released me from my pack and our bond. I truly had nothing now. I was alone completely, and 100%. I was disoriented and could not focus on anything anymore. Not voices, not people, not touch or anything. My senses were useless. With a loud cry my wolf let out within me, she disappeared into nothingness. I could not feel her anymore, nor could I myself. I was gone. Just like her. And then I disappeared, into a dark abyss. 1 week. That's how long I had been cooped up inside my room. I was out the first 24 hours of it, and the rest I had laid here. I only got up to use the bathroom and shower. I had to force myself to do that. No one came to visit me, no one called to check up on me, it was just me, myself, and I inside this room. My parents were the only ones who even tried to console me. I couldn't talk to them though. I couldn't talk to anyone. I was too broken. I barely had the will to live. I didn't want to, but I couldn't do that to my parents. They were the reason I was going to keep going, even if I was a hollow shell. My death would destroy them completely. I had enough respect in me to not put them through that kind of pain. After all, I had experienced a loss of my own very recently. There was a knock at my door, before my mom stuck her head inside my room. She watched me with pity. That was something I had been receiving a lot of lately. It seemed that was the only face they wore now. I brought you some food. Do you feel like eating? No. No, I don't. I didn't answer. Instead, I rolled over on my bed and faced the wall. I heard the door open wider, and her footsteps coming inside my room. She placed the tray of food on the nightstand beside me and sighed. You might feel better if you got out of the house for a while. Maybe went for a run. I'm sure your wolf would enjoy that. She was wrong. I didn't even know where Wolf was anymore. She most likely died along with me a week ago. She hadn't spoken since then. Missing that very important part of me, I was nothing more than a human now. I felt the bed dip down beside me and my mom's frail arms around me in comfort. Please eat something. You've lost so much weight. It's not healthy. I didn't move. She sighed. All right, honey. I'll leave you alone. She rubbed my arm gently and stood up. You know where to find me if you need me. I thought I heard her sniffle before she left my room, but I could have been imagining it. I'd hate to think this what tearing her up to. I was the only one who was supposed to suffer. Half of the day had already passed when my mom came in again. He replaced the tray she had left for me earlier and quickly disappeared from the room. She didn't try to talk to me again. I think she was feeling discouraged. My dad even tried to make conversation with me after Mom left, but I didn't talk to him either. He gave up after a few minutes. Before I knew it, it was nightfall again. I could hear the owls in the woods, outside my house, better at dark. I often fell asleep to their sounds. It was the only thing that helped me sleep. It was almost like a melody just for me. I slept soundly for most of the night. I only woke up to the sound of the wind howling through the trees, or when the rain picked up heavily on the roof. I wasn't sure when the rain started, but it was soothing nonetheless. I like more of a quiet pitter-patter though. It was better when it eased up. When daylight came again, I was awake to greet it. It was 6 a.m. when I heard my dad leave for work. The loud roar of his truck startled me awake, and I hadn't been able to sleep since. Mom usually slept until 9 or so I knew she wouldn't be awake for another. The rain still hadn't let up yet. It would take spurts, becoming heavy and lightening up just as it had last night. The wind was calm though. I finally decided to get up and take a shower when I could no longer hold my bladder, and had to go to the bathroom anyway. It was when I stepped out of the shower and entered back into my bedroom that I got a real surprise. I stumbled back and almost fell to the ground when I saw him standing by my open window. I let out a startled cry before he rushed over to me and placed a hand over my lips. He spoke gently when he told me to breathe. After a moment and I realized he wasn't there to kill me, I did. He then dropped his hand. What are you doing here? I asked him. I surprised myself when I spoke. That was the first words I had spoken since that day, and they just happened to be to him. My voice came out a little strained since it had been nearly a week since I said anything, but he didn't seem to pay that much attention. I came to check on you and I didn't want to wake your family, so I snuck in. Does anyone know you're here? I told Dash. He started but stopped abruptly. He seemed to be thinking over something carefully. Yes, it's known. That still didn't clear up the confusion of why he was so concerned about me. I don't know why I mattered to him in the slightest. He was the one that urged my mate to end things with me. I wanted to talk to you, he said. I was still standing at my door in nothing but a towel, only realizing it when Kieran's eyes traveled down my still dripping wet form. I blushed. It was the first bit of emotion I have felt in days. Although it was embarrassing, it was nice. I took a step back from him. "Excuse me." I grabbed some articles of clothing from my closet and disappeared into the bathroom to dress. Once I was sure I looked presentable enough, I walked back to my room where Kieran stood in the same place I had left him. "What do you want?" I asked. "I told you," he said. "I came to see you." "Well, you've seen me, now you can go." I motioned towards the window. He snuck in with my hand. He didn't move. He just kept staring at me in a way that was starting to raise questions. "I also came to make you an offer," he added. "No." I was quick to refuse him. I just wanted him out of my house. All he did was remind me of that day, and I didn't want to think about it anymore. That's all I had done for the past week. You might change your mind when you hear what I have to say. I doubt that. Have you even thought about what you're going to do now? Are you going to stay here reliving the pain of that day, every time you see them together? His question caught me off guard. I hadn't expected him to come right out and ask that when it hardly concerned him. Though, still, he did ask a good question. It had been only recently that I was starting to think about. I knew I needed to make that decision soon. "I haven't decided yet." "What is it to you?" His expression at my harsh tone didn't change. He still kept the same neutral expression he had on his face from the moment I found him here. "I want to offer you a place in my pack." "Why would you do that?" His offer seemed too suspicious to me. I didn't know if he could be trusted after everything. "Because I know what it's like to lose your mate. I was rejected not so long ago either. I felt the exact same thing you're going through. And no matter how much I want to hate the person who put me through this, I can't because still love her. I've not moved on with anyone else, so all of those feelings I have for Jasmine are still there. And from experience, I know that you feel them for your alpha as well." I was surprised by how dead on he was with my feelings. I was left speechless. I forgot that he also had his heart broken as well. We were on common ground. I shouldn't have treated him so horribly. I suppose, in the end, he was just trying to help me with Daniel, forcing him to get it over with. Even his name caused me to flinch. "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry about Jasmine. No one deserves to be treated as we have." He nodded curtly, but I didn't miss the flinch in him as well. "Thank you. So what do you propose we do? How do we get over them? I don't want to feel this way." I was eager to hear his suggestions. Anything would be better than the suffering I had been through. A faint smile appeared on his lips at my willingness to help him. He scratched the back of his neck a little, looking a little apprehensive after a short moment. "Well, that's what I was getting at. Just keep an open mind when I tell you, okay?" I nodded instantly. "Okay." Then the words came spilling from his lips like he was talking about the weather. I was most certainly not prepared for what I heard. "Be my mate," he suggested. Chapter 6. "Be my mate," he suggested. His words caught me off guard. I wasn't sure what kind of reaction I showed, but I'm pretty sure it was one of sheer surprise. "Me mate with Kieran? That's just insane. We don't even like each other." "Well, I guess he probably likes me due to his excessive flirting at the diner last week, but I had never really thought of him that way. I had a mate." My mood lessened. "Oh yeah, my mate." I had temporarily forgotten about that. The hollow feeling inside my chest started to make its appearance again. Kieran watched me very closely, cautiously. When my eyes began to water again, he tensed. He slowly took a few steps toward me and placed his hands on my shoulders and gently, soothingly, rubbed them. Had my wolf been present, she would have protested to him, touching us wholeheartedly. She still wants Daniel. But that sad truth was she isn't here. She's gone. She left me when he did. I was utterly alone inside myself. See, this is exactly the kind of pain that you can free yourself from. Don't make yourself suffer any more than you have to. He seemed weak as he told me this, like it physically pained him to say it. He was convincing himself as well, and not only me. I had a feeling that he was forcing himself to move on, even though that's not what he really wanted. I don't think I've ever seen an alpha so weak before. Not unless they were dying, at least. I am physically unable to be an alpha to my pack. I'm too weak right now to make any decisions. My beta had to take over for me until I am able to resume my role again, whenever that may be. He paused for a moment before continuing. You can help me with that. We can both be normal again, and possibly even happy if we try hard enough. This time I was finally able to speak. I still had questions poking at my mind and I needed them answered. We don't even like each other like that. I know when you flirted with me before it seemed a bit off. You were forcing yourself to do that. You were still thinking about Jasmine. Weren't you? I was, he agreed. But you forget. I was rejected before you were. I've had a little time to cope. How long ago? I asked. A month, he answered solemnly. His hands dropped from my shoulders, and he took a step back, giving each of us some room. His features still resembled depression. I honestly felt bad for him. I tried to kidnap her, you know, he continued. What? I tried to take her, but your alpha stopped me. He would have most likely tried to kill me had we not been on human territory, he explained. He might have today if it wasn't for the wake of recent events. Is that when she rejected you? I asked. She shook his head. No. It wasn't until after that, when she told me she loved someone else and couldn't accept me. I'm sorry, I said. I really was. I felt bad that he had to go through that. He didn't say anything. He merely turned his head and looked out the window. So why me? Why not mate another she-wolf? He turned to me again. Because you're already broken. If I found someone else, I stand a chance of taking them away from the mate they haven't met yet. I couldn't inflict that kind of pain on another wolf. I nodded my head. I guess that was understandable. Rejected wolves were very hard to come by. It was almost unheard of. So basically we'd just be helping each other out, I stated. Exactly. I had to agree, it was better than being stuck and never moving on. We both deserve to do that at least. It also helps because you're meant to be a Luna, he added. It will come as first instinct to you when you take on that role. I need someone that can help me lead a pack. I laughed lightly. I still can't picture me as leading anyone. I've never been much of a leader, just independent. You will though, he said confidently. I've seen it before. Suddenly something snapped in me and I remembered something. You know, it was pretty crazy of you to come onto our territory last week without any protection. You could have been killed. I know. That's why I'm not fit to be alpha right now. I don't make good choices. I'm reckless. Why didn't Daniel kill you? I asked. He could have that day, but he didn't. I tried to push the pain aside as I mentioned him. It was no small task. It was hurting me beyond belief. I grabbed at my chest. It was probably pity. And maybe some regret for his part in all of this. I doubt he'll be so kind in the future. Once he mates her, none of this will be a bother to him anymore. She'll be the only thing on his mind. Her and running his pack. We'll be virtually non-existent, I whispered to myself. Again the pain increased. I found myself needing to sit down. Kieran sensed that and automatically helped me to my bed. I took a seat on the end of it, placing my hands on my knees, and hunching over them for support. I know this is a lot to take in, but you'll see. Things can get better for both of us. After a moment of silence, he placed a hand on my back and sat down next to me. So what do you say? Will you be my mate and put an end to both of our suffering? It was a tall order, but it was true. We desperately needed each other. We couldn't get through this alone. It was too much. This could fix things and make them much better. So why was I still holding back? Was I so scared to accept the offer he was giving me? Because I would actually have to mate with someone who was not my mate. I don't know how I could do it. My wolf would never approve of this. But, on the other hand, if I did decide to go through with it, then I would have new mate and then she might decide to come back to me. It was worth a shot, right? It was a tough decision, but I knew what I needed to do. I needed to do it for me. It was my only chance at some normalcy in my life. I met Kieran's eyes and agreed with him sincerely. Okay, I'll be your mate. Kieran and I continued to talk about our mating and pack business for the next half hour. I expressed to him that I couldn't leave without my parents behind. They meant too much to me to leave behind. I needed them. They have been my constant support for my entire life. I owed them. He didn't put up any kind of fight at my request to move them to his pack. He seemed to be a firm believer in families sticking together as well. That was comforting to know. Maybe we did some things in common after all. At 9:30 Mom came into my room to serve me breakfast, and for the first time in a week, I actually had an appetite. Kieran didn't stick around to meet her, afraid that she might freak out about him being there, and left it up to me to give my parents the news. I thought it best to wait until Dad was off work tonight and tell them together. That way they can make an informed decision as mates. It was my hope that they would join me in Kieran's pack, but I would not force them. The choice was theirs and theirs alone. "You up?" Mom said in surprise as I came bounding down the stairs. I wasn't sure what exactly shocked her more, the fact that I was dressed for the outside world, or that I was walking around again, without my head hanging to the ground. She muted the television and stood up from the couch. "I'm going out," I replied, coming to a standstill in front of her. Her face lit up into a bright smile. "That's great, Claire." "Yeah, I thought I'd go into town for a little while. I have some things to take care of." She blinked a few times before replying. She seemed curious. "Oh?" I avoided answering any more questions until later tonight. After then, I'd tell her anything she wanted to know. "So, I was thinking," I started. "You and Dad don't have any plans tonight, do you?" "Not that I know of." "Why?" I adjusted the strap on my purse and continued. "Just keep the night open for me. I'm bringing a friend over I'd like for you to meet." This seemed to excite my mother even more. I thought she was going to attack me. "I'd love to meet them. What time should we expect you?" "I'll be here as soon as Dad gets off work." She nodded her head and smiled. "I'll prepare a roast." I could already see her mind coming up with ideas about tonight. She looked more excited than I was. She lived for this kind of thing. My mother was a homemaker. She'd always been the one to take care of me and the house. She never wished for a life outside the pack. She was just content with being a mother, a wife, and a mate. I was okay with that because that's what she wanted, but for me, I wanted to do so much more. I wanted adventure and to exploration. I didn't want to settle down for the rest of my life. Every wolf should have a little fun before they make a decision about their future. Mom hugged me warmly for a moment before sighing and releasing me. I could still see traces of worry on her face. "I'm really glad you're better, honey. Your father and I have been so worried about you. I wasn't better. I was far from better. I would never be better again. Well, not without some healing at least. Right now, I was more like a band-aid. The wound was still very much underneath it, but I was finally able to cover it up now and hurt in private. They wouldn't have to see me suffer on the outside anymore. I wouldn't have to worry them anymore. Well, I should go. The day is almost half over. Okay, she nodded. Be careful. I smiled at her and bid her goodbye before disappearing out the door. I met Kieran in town at my diner. This was something I had been dreading since our talk this morning. It was hard enough that I had to walk back into this place after what happened, but now I had to quit my job as well. One of the stipulations he had before allowing me to join the pack. He felt it was better to get as far away from Daniel as possible, and working here wouldn't allow that. I would still have to see him and his mate anytime he decided to come here. It made sense. Yet another thing I would have to give up for Daniel. Charlie sat across from us, watching Kieran with much displeasure. At this point they were both having a staring contest. It wasn't until I cleared my throat that they both looked away. Are you sure you're not in some kind of trouble? He asked me warily. I could tell by the looks he was giving Kieran that he didn't trust him. I'm only glad he didn't know our species, or trust wouldn't be the only problem we had. Yes, I replied. I just think it's time for me to move on. Charlie was always good to me and I hated to just leave him hanging after he kept me employed for the past year, but this was necessary. I think he was more worried about me than upset about my leaving. There couldn't be a better employer anywhere. He made sure to always look out for me. I'd miss talking to this grey-haired man. Does this have anything to do with you passing out last week? Some young man told me about what happened after you were taken home. I'm glad no one outside the pack knew what happened to me. I'm leaving because it's what I want to do. There was nothing that had any bearing on my decision, I explained. Just want to come here and give you my notice. His face softened a bit. Well, I guess if it's what you want. But just know that you've always got a place here if you want to come back. Thank you, Charlie, I smiled. I leaned across the counter and gave him a quick goodbye hug and made sure to pull away before I became too emotional over my departure. I would miss this place, but we all have to move on sometimes. It's just a part of life. Are you gonna be okay? Kieran asked before we were even out of the parking lot. He had been watching me closely since my heartfelt goodbye. Yeah, goodbyes are always hard, that's all. I stared out the passenger side window taking in every last thing I could about this place. It was my hometown and always will be. I grew up here. I had my first shift in the front yard of my house. I got my first boyfriend in the middle school I attended here. This is where I threw up on stage for in the 5th grade Christmas pageant. Memories like that didn't just go away. They were a part of who I was. I just didn't know what to do with them. I felt guilty. I was leaving behind everything I knew, for a new pack life. Did it make me a bad person to feel happy about that? Maybe, but I needed this. Just once I was to be a little selfish, and out my happiness first. The pack could think what they wanted of me, I didn't care. It didn't matter that they would look down their noses at me for deserting them. I knew where my pack stood on leaving the pack family, but I often wondered what they would do if it were one of them who were rejected. I don't think they would keep the same beliefs on staying then. Kieran pulled up to my house at 5 o'clock, just before my father arrived. I was as nervous as the day I introduced him to Sean O'Malley, my 6th grade boyfriend. He was shaking by the time he left my house that day. My dad was a bit intimidating back then, still being a pack fighter and all. After he retired he became more like the rest of us. He hardly ever worked out anymore, apart from pack training exercises. He decided to step down when there were more young fighters stepping up in the pack. I think he felt out of place. He needed the rest anyway. Before we entered the house, I stopped him just before we reached the door. I know I've told you already, but thank you, again. I know we are just doing this to help each other, and you didn't have to, so thanks. I'd probably still be in bed wallowing in pain and self-pity if you hadn't saved me. He looked at me and gave a small sigh. Not one of annoyance, but in more of understanding. Like I said, I've been where you are. And I guess I still am. As long as we band together, nothing can touch us. Things will get better. You just have to trust me. I'm getting there, I admitted. It was strange, but I was starting to trust him, and it slightly scared me. I couldn't justify it other than he was helping me in a time of need. Deep down I knew it went beyond that, but I hadn't really figured that out yet. Maybe it's just that I really wanted to trust him, so I am. Maybe I don't have a real reasoning for it after all. Good, he smiled. You'll need to learn how to do that before we can become mates. Mates need trust above all else. I agreed. Suddenly something popped in my head. You said someone knew you were here before. You got clearance from the pack. I did, he nodded, but he looked remorseful. You talked to Daniel. I guessed. I told him I was offering you a place with me. He didn't object. I should say not. He was the one who let me go in the first place. I'm sure it would be much easier on him if I was gone. I wouldn't be a constant reminder of the pain he put me through. I hope he's happy with her. I really do. I knew my chances were slim anyway. He already had someone before me and I couldn't change that. I don't hold a grudge against him, I'm just hurt. I know one day I'll get past this, and when I do, it will be a glorious day. Your dad's coming, he stated, listening intently at the door. He heard us talking. Just seconds after Kieran's words, the door came open, proving him right. He did have more intensified hearing the rest of us wolves, so it wasn't a surprise he hear him. Claire, my dad said, looking between Kieran and I. Your mom said you were brining someone over. Dad, this is Kieran Knight, Alpha of Perilous Pack. Kieran, this is my dad, Richard Warren. Nice to meet you, Dad said, dipping his head in respect. And I'm Patricia, Richard's mate and Claire's mom. I hadn't even seen where my mother came from, but yet she was stand here in front of my dad with her hand extended to Kieran, with a huge grin on her face. Nice to meet you both, he smiled, taking both my parents' hands. I have to say, Dad started while awkwardly scratching the back of his neck. When my wife said Claire was having a friend over, I pictured someone with a little less testosterone. I nearly laughed. Daddy was being his same old protective self. I could tell he was less than pleased to see a male wolf standing next to me at the door. He cautiously eyed the distance between our arms and smiled when it suited him. Kieran looked amused. I guess this must come as some surprise then. Dad merely grunted and striated himself up, trying to act like that fact no longer bothered him. Mom took this time to speak up again. Well, come in you two before the food gets cold, she said, ushering us inside. We followed in after her, and it was then that the gravity of the situation finally hit me. I was about to spring some massive news on them, and it could change everything. They'll either be happy for me or not. Either way, after tonight I was leaving with Kieran. I just hoped they supported me. Don't get left behind in the chase for independence. Hit subscribe and ring the bell for alerts on the next adventure.